Welcome, everyone, and thank you for coming this evening to get an update on gun violence in Wilmington and the programs that are in place to try to reduce that. We have with us here Corie Priest, who many of you may remember because he spoke to us last December about reentry programs, I believe it was. And so we're glad to have Corie back with us tonight. Corie is the Community Engagement Specialist for the Delaware Department of Justice. And this is the first time the Attorney General's office in the state of Delaware, and maybe the country, has hired someone they formerly prosecuted. Corie was born and raised in Southbridge and North Side sections of Wilmington. After coming home from incarceration 10 years ago, Corie has been a moving force in reentry and criminal justice reform in the state of Delaware. Corie is the director of CL Priest Consulting, which specializes in mass incarceration, inner city poverty and crime, reentry, workforce development, child support, and community engagement. Mr. Priest volunteers his time on several committees, which include Law Enforcement Accountability Task Force, Community Engagement and Policing, and the Delaware Correctional Reentry Commission, Communities of Support Subcommittee. Corie has a great passion to encourage, support, listen, and advocate for individuals looking to overcome barriers and obstacles to empower them to become their best selves. And here's a quote I love. If what you went through in life does not give you the ability to change the world in extraordinary ways, you haven't found your purpose yet. From Corie.
Thank you, Lynn.
Take it away.
So good evening, you guys. I'm really appreciative of the opportunity to discuss, gun violence in Wilmington and any other topic that we can bring up tonight, but in particular, gun violence in Wilmington and what's happening as it relates to addressing that issue. Of course, I work for the Attorney General's office. I am now in the community engagement program administrator. I got a little the same role, but a new title. And I work or do a lot of work to address gun violence in our city and state. And so I'm appreciative of the opportunity to really talk about this issue. So I am on the executive committee of GVI, Group Violence Intervention. I do a little boots to the groundwork, or a lot of boots to the groundwork, but mainly couple that with being on a leadership committee. I'm also in spaces and rooms to discuss these issues with law enforcement, with our legislators, and with citizens of our community. And so, as we look at gun violence today in Wilmington, it can be categorized in many different aspects, right? So I really deal with group violence, and not one-off shootings like domestic violence or a drug turf one-off, this is my area, not your area type of situation, but really group violence. And there are some other agencies that deals with group violence also. Christiana Care has evolved, where many of our trauma surgeons who are affected by trauma, right? Trauma, gun violence, and stabbings and that type of trauma are affected greatly too. And so, if someone goes into the hospital with a gunshot victim goes into the hospital, how do we service that person where we won't see them again? Because most times, or sometimes next time, it won't be, be in the body bag, or be something more severe. So how do we address that population of folks who are being shot but are walking out of the hospital? Providing services and resources so they will not be a victim again is paramount to reducing violence. Because sometimes your victim is your suspect and vice versa. And so Evolve works closely with CIT and the Center for Structural Violence in addressing those issues and mediating the beef if need be. GVI, Group Violence Intervention, is kind of considered the I wouldn't call it the number one, but deliberately targeting gun violence is what they do, right? So it's like you can't be a part of GVI without having some association to gun violence, whether you're going to be a shooter or are a shooter or be a victim of gun violence. And so there are about 20 groups in the city of Wilmington that are a part of GVI. And it started out as an initiative for just adults, 18 and up. And we realized that individuals younger to 18 are entrenched in gun violence. We had to expand to the youth. And there's different approaches. So if you're addressing the needs of a youth who's entrenched in gun violence, you have to address the needs of the family, the needs of the household, which is very important. Because not only is that household consist of siblings or moms and dads, but uncles, aunts, grandparents, cousins, close friends who may be sleeping on the couch. They all get the full services of GVI. Adults, 18 and up, is a little different. But sometimes my argument is if you're 18 and is entrenched in gun violence and traumas that's out the wazoo, then you're really 13, 14, or 15. You're not an adult. But that's for the legality purposes, 18 is an adult. But mentally, most of our folks who are entrenched in gun violence and inner city poverty and mass incarceration and all of the social ills, 18, 19, 20, 21 can still be considered juvenile, just because they don't have that train of thought yet, that thinking pattern, that adult thinking habit. But for the sake of legality purpose, 18 is adult. I think they need to kind of look at that and do some sort of corrective action around that, right? Because I have 18-year-olds who really think like a 13-year-old, right? But anyway, and so adults are treated a little differently. Adults are treated as one-off. So if an adult is interested in gun violence, we just treat the adult. But many of the adults are bringing their friends and family along too. Like, hey, I have this awesome program. I have this awesome situation in GVI. It got me employed. It has me thinking differently about life. I didn't think I was going to live to be 16 and I'm 18, and hopefully I can live the long life. And because someone has believed in me. So GVI addressing the needs of adults is really it's innovative, right? This whole idea that you can address the needs of people who are going to be shot or due to shooting is an innovative approach. Now, David Kennedy has his idea what GVI is. It came from John Jay College and David Kennedy. But this approach, I think, is a little differently, right? It's really support and outreach. So they have a support and outreach and a law enforcement component. Support and outreach is really the spirit of a grassroots organization, but it lies under Health and Social Services in Delaware. And so with that, it gives us the ability, or GVI the ability, to cut the red tape. If someone needs to be relocated because of some safety issues and family safety issues, they can be relocated. Someone needs a job or employment or education, or any other ancillary services, then it can easily happen just because red tape can be cut. And so gun violence now in Wilmington, and I'm gonna just knock on wood, is reduced at a large clip. Last time I checked, it was reduced to between 55 and 60%. Problem is, when there's a high profile shooting, it seemed like nothing's being done. There have been several high profile shootings over the summer, and it seemed like nothing is being done. and we get calls, myself included, about what can we do? How can we help reduce gun violence, or how can we address the needs of folks who are entrenched in gun violence, or how do we make victims whole, or a plethora of questions that or situations that people want to help out with, because one shooting is too many, one victim, one homicide victim is too many in our community, and we can't stop it. In my opinion, this is Corie Priest talking, and not Corie Priest from the DOJ. Or, in my opinion, it has to be community driven. It has to be community driven. I don't think our legislators can stop what's happening. I don't think our mayor, our governor, our chief. I think personally, Corie Priest is talking here again. It has to begin again. It begins with our community. And how do we get our community more involved into what's happening? How do I have my grandma safe and secure on her front step? So I think it begins with community, and how do we galvanize our community to address the needs of the community to reduce gun violence. But if you look at the numbers suggest gun violence is down a great deal today, and homicides are down a great deal today in the city of Wilmington. And gun violence today in Wilmington and any other mid-major or major city is an epidemic. It's just not Wilmington here. It's Dover's experiencing high gun violence, and GVI has moved down to Dover. Most of our cities, look at Philadelphia, look at Chicago, like gun violence is extraordinarily high. Especially given after the pandemic and being locked in, and there are many different reasons for it, right? And when we talk about gun violence, for me, I talk about group violence and inner city violence. But gun violence is also suicide by gun, domestic violence, by firearm, random shootings that take place. There's more mass shootings in America today than any other time in history. Mass shootings are shootings that involve 4 or more people. And so, when we look at gun violence, you have to address it on different levels. If you're just addressing group violence, if you're just, suicides is mental health, and having the abilities to talk things out, and having a clinician or a family member or someone checking on people who may be experiencing some mental health difficulties, especially if So I think when we're addressing gun violence, you have to address it purposeful with the known fact that there are different types of gun violence in our community. And I'll stop there with some questions if you guys have them, and I can keep on rolling.
So Corie, you talked about the fact that the gun violence and homicides are down. Can you put that in perspective? Because I know, for a while it had been going up and up. If I remember, 2017 was, reached sort of a peak, and then it came down in 2018 and 19, and then went back up again. So when we say it's come down, has it come back down to the levels that we were in 2019, or like what does it come down to?
So you measure it over time, right? So 31 homicides in Wilmington is the record, I believe, in a single year. 32, and that may have occurred in 2020. I'm not going to spell out these numbers, but but that's the record, right? And so there's a projection. If there are 8, like I said, hypothetically, if there are 8 homicides at this time of the year, then you're looking at historically, what is the number? What is the barometer? Like I said, 1 homicide is too many in our community, way too many. And so when you look at, I wish I had these numbers up here. But if you look at last year and where was that relative to where it's at this year, there's a reduction. And a reduction happens for various different reasons. Some people, that's involved heavily in gun violence, a lot of them or some of them, relative to a number, are incarcerated. They've indicted some groups. They've locked up some people who should be locked up, and got them off the streets. And there are now different groups who are really looking at folks who commit gun violence, right? Because there's a point in time there was a group who was indicted, and now some of them are being released. You might see an uptick, and then when those folks are identified and arrested again, it kind of evens out, goes down. So I think the reduction in gun violence has to do with a lot of different initiatives and law enforcement presence to arrest the people who are involved in gun violence. You're muted, Lynn.
Oops, a couple other people with hands up. I see Marge, do you want to go next?
Well, I just wanted to say I appreciated your comments on this, Corie, because I find in talking with the people that I know that when I mentioned that, we're not hearing daily reports of all the shootings in Wilmington anymore, their perception is still that Wilmington is a very dangerous city. And I think for the average person, we respond to all the reports of the shootings. We forget to respond to the lack of reports. When there aren't reports, we don't notice that so much as when there are reports. So people are still, the image of the city is left there as a violent place. Unfortunately, yeah.
Well, I definitely appreciate that comment, Marge. Crime is relational, right? For the most part. You'll have some one-offs where an innocent victim was shot and killed, or just shot in itself. But across the world, right, crime is relational. Most people know who committed a crime against them, and vice versa, right? I still think Wilmington is a safe place. Is a very safe place to be. There are parts in Wilmington you don't want to go in, but just like anywhere, right? But just because you won't fit in there, right? That's just that's any place. But crime is committed mostly, I say mostly, with people who know who's going to commit that crime against them, right? There are very few one-offs. There's some robbery stuff that might happen here and there, or innocent victim is shot and killed. But those are kind of outliers, really, as it relates to crime in any particular area.
Thanks. How about Sandy?
Yes. So when you're saying group violence, is that the same as gang? Group meaning gang?
Good question. Yeah, we can't consider these groups gangs because there's no hierarchy, really, right? Like, so a gang, you'll have a leader, and you'll have, there's a pyramid of, your leader, your capos, your street soldiers, your foot soldiers. That's not what's happening for the most part in Wilmington. Everybody is on an even kill. Everybody kind of has the same accountability, or there's no, I'm the leader and you guys are going to follow me. In Dover, there's the Bloods and Crips, which is a different type of, we consider those gangs because they have that leadership structure. In Wilmington, it's mostly kids who grew up with each other, who, or went to school with each other, that are now beefing over something that happened 8 years ago. And some of them don't even know why it even started. So we kind of just say there are groups because you can't really pinpoint their leadership structure. They don't have one. And it's fueled by social media, how many likes, who disrespected you, and it's a bunch of, that's what happens there. So we consider, I stop from saying groups. I mean gangs, because there's a different level of structure to a gang.
Thank you. That's really clarifying. Very helpful.
Sue?
Yeah, Corie, I think it's interesting to talk about what is the state of things. But I think what's really important is, what are we doing about this and on what basis? We are not the only city in the country that's struggling with this. There are other places that are having as much or more difficulty as we are, but there are other cities that are making significant progress. And I find myself wondering, where does our strategy, where do our tactics come from? Are we creating these ourselves? Are we learning from other cities? I saw the front page article in the paper a week or so ago about a report from a New Jersey group that came in and took a look at what's happening in Wilmington and did an assessment, and I assume made some recommendations. There was an article in the paper just in the last day or so about Chicago and the amazing progress they've made. Their shootings are down 20%. Their homicides are down 16%. And they attribute it to community engagement, to a surgical deployment of police officers to crime scenes, and to police taking 12,000 guns off the street every year. What are we doing? I mean, I think we don't see what the plan is, what the approach is, and how are we leveraging what other cities have found either doesn't work or does work. And I think making that approach clear to the community would be real. I think it would be really helpful. It's all sort of invisible, is my perspective.
So I think in the next couple of weeks, you're going to see a report come out that's going to applaud what Wilmington is doing. I don't want to get ahead of that. So that's where I'm going to leave it, because I don't know what's going to be in that. But as it relates, so, the numbers, Chicago numbers are what they are. I think Wilmington numbers are a little better, right? And I think that's what you're going to hear in a few weeks. But it is community engagement, right? It is meeting the basic needs of people who are involved in this culture of crime. And I think I mentioned a few of them earlier, CIT and Center for Structural Equity. Not that I really know exactly what they're doing, but the hope is that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing in terms of reducing gun violence and mediating the beefs, and that's what they're designed to do. But they are heavily in the community. GVI support and outreach is really about engaging, making people feel loved and important. People who don't really feel that, most people who are affected by gun violence, whether they're the shooter or being shot, don't feel that our community is embracing them. So community engagement is hugely important to that demographic of folk. And so when the strategies are that are out there, especially as it relates to Wilmington, are those, I think, and sometimes, and they might chop my neck off for it, but, there's a captive audience inside of our correction system, and I don't know what we're doing relative to addressing gun violence there, right? You have many different programs, reentry programs. You have workforce development programs that have these individuals coming through their programs. And the only, and I'm gonna keep saying, the only people who are deliberately targeting gun violence in this sort of manner really is GVI, right? Some people might say other people are doing it, but that is their prime purpose. You're a shooter, you've been shot, come to this group, right? And let's get down to the nitty gritty. Let's have this leader of this group meet this leader of the group. I'm talking about real leaders, and form this relationship here. And so, Sue, we do a horrible job at exposing our great outcomes. That's everywhere, everybody, telling the successes of what we're doing, right? Because when you just look at numbers, it's just numbers. But I can give you 10 individuals who've changed their lives around from being a shooter or being shot and going to jail, coming out from doing, from gun offenses, personal prohibited offenses, that are doing damn good, that I struggle to tell their story because I don't want to exploit their livelihood. I don't want to exploit them in this manner. But I think we do a horrible job at telling successes of people who, who experience these type of, situations, gun violence, being shot, doing the shooting. It's a struggle of mine anyway. But I can tell you, I have more than enough people that I service and talk to time in and time out a week that I can tell a great story with. But I struggle with that because I don't want to exploit no one else's situation there. But there's a lot of good things happening. And I think the numbers suggest you'll definitely see some numbers. But the SAFER came in. City contracted this group from out of Newark, New Jersey to come in and do a landscape analysis on why crime exists in Wilmington. It came up with their recommendations, and many of the groups I'm talking about today were in the report. And there's some action coming behind it.
Thanks. Casey?
Thanks. Corie, one of the things we're seeing in large cities around the country, particularly during the COVID epidemic, is an increased incidence of juveniles involved in gun violence. And I wonder what is the situation in Wilmington, the relative engagement of young people in gun violence in this community?
Yeah, juveniles is more prevalent than what we hope, right? A lot of juveniles are involved in gun violence. And it may be, it's systemic, right? The system is favorable to juveniles, to be honest. Juvenile can get caught with a gun and be home in 6 months, right? And that's a system issue, I think, and that we have to address. And so the accountability there for juveniles is a lot less than what it is as an adult. And then you have, and there's a lot of juvenile on juvenile violence, mainly driven behind social media, Instagram and Facebook and TikTok and all this, that drives a lot. The music drives a lot of violence. It intoxication, popping, whatever substance you can pop and feel invincible. So it's not just one thing. It's a plethora of things that contribute to juveniles and gun violence. And we can't lose sight that, like I said, 18-year-old, 19-year-old, 20-year-olds are hanging out with 15 and 16-year-olds, and, a lot of times that influence there is a negative influence. And so it's almost like, hey, hang out with me, but you're going to be the one to hold the gun and, that type of influence. And, so it's a lot of different, dynamic issues around juveniles and gun violence. And then, you know, like you said, COVID, a lot of these kids who are involved aren't going to school, or, you know, aren't involved in the educational world. So it's a lot. It's a lot, you know, a lot to unpack there. And they have other agencies that's looking to address that. Network Connects, and I said Center for Structural Equity, you know, Challenge Program and YAP program, and, you know, they're all looking at how do we address the needs of these young people. But when you address the needs of the young people, you have to address the needs of the people that's in our household too, because that's where they're going back to. That's where they're laying their heads at, you know. And so if the folks in that house aren't holding a young person accountable, or if the folks in that house aren't meeting the basic needs of that young person, like food in the house, or providing the basic needs and keeping the electric on, and, you know, the energy on and heat on and all that stuff, then, you know, the people who are servicing these young people are behind the 8 ball anyway. So you got to address the whole household when you're addressing the needs of young people.
So Corie, one of the other things that I think was both pointed out in the report that this New Jersey group just put out, but is evident from a lot of the other research that's been published from jurisdictions around the country, is that you know, any one program is not going to be sufficient to address this. And so there's lots of good data on a program like GVI, the Group Violence Intervention. There's also a lot of good data on hospital-based violence intervention programs, like the Evolve program at Christiana Care, and a lot of good data on community-based violence intervention programs, where I think the data shows that there are the most successes is when you have all of those, when you're not relying on one, when you have each of those well-funded and well-resourced with highly well-trained individuals running, implementing the program to move it forward. And, you know, I guess one of the questions that I have is, you know, in Delaware, just, you know, watching this over the last few years, you know, we finally have, you know, substantial and what seems to be sustainable funding for the GVI program, which is really good that that's, you know, seems to be sustainably funded at this point. The hospital-based program, you know, had to largely fund its own program. You know, they haven't yet been able to get outside dollars to help really ramp that one up in the way that I think it could be. And for community-based programs, they're still in their infancy and have largely pivoted in other directions towards, you know, more preventive measures as opposed to true violence intervention programs, because the small amount of philanthropic dollars they get isn't sufficient for them to, you know, they're not resourced in a way to really have a strong community-based violence intervention program. And I think that was one of the strongest things being put forward in the New Jersey report, is that a lot more funding needs to be put into those programs. So my question for you would be, you know, what do you think about the need to better resource some of those other programs? And also, what level of coordination is already happening or could you envision happening among those different programs? Again, the GBI, which is the law enforcement centric program, with Evolve, the hospital-based one, and community-based programs.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, me personally, I think there needs to be someone that can bridge the gap with all three kind of sectors, right? Because if you leave it up to those individual, you know, entities or agencies, or they struggle to mesh, right? They struggle to mesh for whatever reason. Delaware is finicky, right? There's a lot of silos. There's a lot of people want to do it their way and do it you know, but if the evidence suggests, and everything should be evidence-based, right? Or at least best practices. But let's go with the evidence-based theory, that if everyone is working together, and better outcomes, then better outcomes can happen, right? The hope is we don't need evolve, right? I'm just saying that because the hope is no one is being shot, right? Like, so if no one's being shot, we wouldn't need no one would be going to the emergency room in the first place. So the hope is we don't need evolve. And, you know, I love Dr. Chin, you know, it's my guy. But if we're really talking with some sense here, is that community-based organizations coupled with some sort of state backing, state entity, GVI is backed by DHSS, evolve in there. But I think there needs to be one particular person that bridges the gap between all of them, right? Brace bridge, boom, 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 boom. And that's going to hold everyone accountable to the mission. Whatever the mission is, to save lives, right? Create safer communities for all of our citizens in a particular area. Wilmington, Newcastle County, Dover, Kent County, Sussex County. And so this one person, or maybe a deputy, a chief, a deputy, but that's going to bridge the gap and hold these agencies accountable to the great things they're doing and the things that they can work on, right? So if the design is we're going to report the gun shooting scenes, and we're going to engage with the community there, and we're going to, you know, provide mental health and trauma treatment to this community. Who is that going to be, right? Is that going to be CIT? Is that going to be Structural Equity, Center for Structural Equity? Is it GVI? Because anytime there's a shooting in our community, that's a traumatic experience, even if no one was shot, right? Even if you hear the sound of gunfire in our community, it's a traumatic event, but that doesn't get reported, right? There's a lot of shooting going on that just don't get reported because nothing was hit or there's no victims. But that doesn't mean, I'm saying victims in quotes, because the victim is the person who heard the shot. You know, we don't think about that as a whole. Like our community is being traumatized by gun violence. Just the mere sound of a gunshot. But so the question, Lynn, is how do we get everybody on the same page, the same mission, the same goal, the same accountability, and without feelings involved? There's been people doing this work for a long time, like a long time before I got involved. People have been doing this work for a long time, and you know, how do we know fidelity is being measured? So there needs to be a fidelity police and accountability police. It's kind of the same thing, but you reward people for doing great things. And so if XYZ agency is the gold standard in reducing violence in our community, why wouldn't they be on the front page of the news journal, right? Or if XYZ agency is not doing so great and they're still receiving millions of dollars, then how come they're not being held accountable? How come there's no corrective action? So Lynn, to your question is, there needs to be somebody who is the fidelity police to this whole thing and bridge the gap together. That's what I think.
Thanks, Corie. Sue?
You're on mute, Sue.
That would seem to be a no-brainer. I mean, as any entity seeks to solve multi faction issues and problems, coordinating the work, bringing it together. It's the first thing you do. I mean, it's the first thing you do. Saying
Yeah.
you do your thing, you do your thing, you do your thing, and let's just hope it all works is insanity. And doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result is insanity. So
Yeah.
it would seem to me that creating an entity with responsibility for this overall that works with the various groups who are doing their level best to make a difference is a no-brainer. What does it take to make that happen?
Is that a rhetorical question, or are you asking?
No, it's not. It's not.
So I think there's going to be some action soon, right? And with this ARPA money, I think there's millions of dollars coming into the state to kind of look at this holistically, and I think they're going to create. The mayor's trying to create this position, maybe just to do that, But we'll see. Time will tell. I've been in a few discussions around that. Yeah. So, but I think there is a movement to have I call it the fidelity police, but the fidelity official. And so I think there's some momentum behind that, and I think that's probably what the SAFER report is kind of suggested. Having an office of crime prevention, and that person, is tasked with doing that. You mentioned something else. I just can't remember what it was. Yeah, but so I think I had something in mind. It has to be apolitical. This can't be a political movement, right? This can't, and it seems like gun violence, they want to make gun violence political. It's not people are losing their lives, and it shouldn't be politically driven. It has to be predicated on human beings losing their lives, or just being shot in itself, being traumatized by the action of gun violence. So it has to be an apolitical movement that doesn't care about people's feelings. So if I take all your funding away because you're doing a crappy job, then that's just what it is. We've given you the corrective action to get it done, and you didn't do it. Or, wow, you're doing an amazing job. How can we give you more capital to make it happen, to hire more qualified people, to get a bigger building, to whatever it is, to build capacity with folks and entities and agencies who are doing it great. How do we do that? How do we address the needs of agencies and organizations who aren't doing who aren't working to fidelity? How do we get them there? How do we build them up to get them there? That's where I would be at. That's my goal. Yeah.
The other place where I
Oh.
think that the powers that may be are missing the boat is communicating with the city, with the community. What's happening? What's not happening? What's
Yeah.
needed? I mean, we sort of just like read the news, It's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know who's doing what. There's a need to engage in community, not just with the areas that are the locus of the gun violence, but engage the full community in here's what we're trying to achieve, here's what's been successful, here's what hasn't, here's what we're doing, and get everybody on board and supporting the work that needs to be done. It's a huge missed opportunity.
So Sue, how would you like, so all things being fair and equal, how would you like that information disseminated? Would you like a newsletter? Would you like an email? Would you like a website? Like, so how, or a station where that information can be provided? Like, how would you like to receive your information?
Well, what we know is that everybody processes information differently. And so I think the answer is yes to all of those things. I think some in-person town hall kind of, here's an opportunity for us to share information, to answer questions. I mean, I know some of those can be difficult, but I think
Yeah.
if it's clear that the goal is to share meaningful information and engage people in finding a solution. And if people feel that that is being done authentically, with good intent, everybody wants this situation improved. And as individuals, we don't know how to do it. But there are ways to engage groups, to engage individuals. And so it's almost like an element of this overall perspective is the communications piece. Somebody needs to be responsible for the communications piece and recognize that it's not just sending information out. It's engaging in dialogue and conversation and getting ideas. And that needs that, if that were a priority, I think it would help.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thanks, Sue.
March. I thought March had her hand up. You're on mute.
Just to follow up on that, I think you said at the beginning, and in something you've been on before, I think I remember that you are in the Attorney General's office. Are you not part of her office? Yes. Okay. So I'm
Yes, I am.
wondering, where is the funding coming from for your group or some of these other groups if it's state funding? What is the emphasis for that? Is that like grant and aid money? Is it something out of health, Delaware Health and Human Services? Is it law enforcement money? Where is the funding for these various groups from the state?
So some of them are, so if it's under DHSS, they can actually petition, but they can actually ask for it in a line item budget down from OMB. And so so they go down Legislative Hall and say, hey, GVI is an important initiative and we need X amount of dollars to make it happen. And so the General Assembly will approve or not approve it. That's state stuff. But there are also places like Criminal Justice Council who gets federal dollars. They're the gatekeeper to the federal dollars that comes into the Delaware for criminal justice purposes. And so there might be an RFP out there that a particular agency can respond to, request for proposal that a particular agency can respond to get those dollars if it meets the the requirements of the grant. There could be some philanthropy dollars, but for state stuff, CJC and some general funds. There's some county money out there too, from Matt Meyer. There's some City of Wilmington dollars, and right now there's a lot of ARPA money out there. The COVID ARPA funds is out there for agencies to tap into also.
Thank you.
Lynn, did you have any other questions?
Actually, Sue, when she did a follow-up, shared what I was going to share, which is the communications need to be multi-format, and in particular ones where there can be some back and forth and opportunity for the community to ask questions and have that dialogue with the folks who are running the programs.
Yeah, that'd be pretty awesome. And I think everybody should designate someone to answer those questions, right? And that could be, that type of platform or an app could be useful. Newsletter, getting everybody on the same page. Like if there's an office of crime prevention, maybe there's a newsletter every month, giving updates on what everybody's doing. And I wouldn't leave out reentry programs like the Achievement Center, or like Project New Start, and they have to be included in reducing violence in our city, state, because those are the folks who are coming out of incarceration. And if you're going inside of any of our facilities, then the primary goal is to create safer communities, right? So, when I was running group inside of the facilities, my primary purpose was to get people to think differently, changing their thoughts and actions and behaviors and negative peer influences. I wasn't just going there shooting to shoot, just to say, hey, what's up, bud? Hey, good seeing you. No, it has to be purpose-driven communication. And if anybody is engaging our returning citizen population, the primary purpose is to move them into a better space to be better citizens and to create safer communities. That's hands down what that goal should be. And if that's not happening, we got to get those folks out of the way, because that's what they are. They're just in the way. I work for the Attorney General's office, and I kid you not that I didn't think I would be in this space years ago coming out of incarceration. But I also didn't think I could have this sort of systemic movement. I didn't think I would be the guy who, being on this call here talking about gun violence, but, and last year talking about reentry, and I'm bridging the gap, right? Because reentry done properly should create safer communities, and less violence with the people you engage with. I don't know. That was just my little rant.
Any other final questions before we wrap for the evening?
This is sort of an insignificant question, perhaps in light of the overall pictures and questions you've asked, but how much of what's happening is driven by drugs? It sounds like from what you've said, Corie, that a lot of it is happens because of other things like economy and social standing and the group dynamics of the kids feeling that they don't belong. But how much of it might be due to drug violence in the city?
Yeah, there's a drug violence has decreased in my belief. I don't have any empirical data to suggest that most of these shootings are driven by drugs, but I think it's decreased, especially as it relates to early 90s, late 90s, 2000s, because that was drug turf wars was there. That's not the case that's not the case now. Like, you'll still have some drug beefs and robberies going bad or drug deals going bad, things of that nature. But it's not as prevalent as it was, for me growing up in the 90s and in the 2000s. That was all you heard was, oh man, there was a drug deal going bad, or he got robbed for his drugs and the shooting occurred, and yeah. So it's not as prevalent as it used to be, but it's still a thing. It still exists.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Well, if not, then I just want to thank you, Corie, for setting aside time to come and educate us, share your thoughts and expertise with us, so we are better informed about what's happening.
Yeah.
we really appreciate you coming out and doing that for us. And don't be surprised if next year you get another invitation from us. We like to stay updated on the work that you're involved in.
Good. So I do want to say, I'm excited to announce this. I think, Len, you know that the ACLU is going to honor me next Wednesday with the Candler Award. I don't know if you guys are heavily involved in the ACLU, but the American Civil Liberties Union of Delaware are honoring me for the work I've done in the community from a civic role model, I suppose. And so that's going to take place Memorial Hall, Hokesson Memorial Hall on Wednesday from 6 to 9. It's also virtual. So if y'all want to see or come to a great event, please visit the website. I'll be there with a lot of people that support me, family members, and I think it'll be a great event. And I'm hugely excited about the opportunity to be awarded the Candler Award because I interned there in 2014 when I went to Delaware Tech, and I was always wondering, how do I get this award? I was like, hey, how do I get this? Because I had to help, with the dinner, and I set it up, helped set up, stuff, and I'm like, how the heck do I get this award? And I kind of forgot about it. They asked me to be on the board in 2019, but the DOJ hired me, and so I couldn't be on the board at the ACLU because I was an employee of the DOJ. And that's like oil and water, and they don't get along. But yeah, they honored me this year with the Candler Award, and so as a DOJ, I don't think they look at me as a DOJ employee. I think they just look at me as someone who is heavily involved in criminal justice reform and pardons expungements and advocating for the people. And so, but they are going to award me that award next week. And I just want to let you guys know if there was some opportunity to attend, or at least it could be on you guys' radar. But all in all, I really appreciate our time spent tonight. I left my email address in the chat and my cell phone number in the chat. If y'all ever think of any questions, few days or whenever, if y'all want to just reach out for anything, I'm always available. It's a cell phone number I left, so it's always on my hip. It's not an office number that I might not answer, but I just want y'all to know that I'm always connected.
And
Well, congratulations, Corie, and thank you.
yes,
Very nice honor.
Thanks so much for giving your presentation tonight.
Indeed, thank you.
and I'm so sorry I didn't proactively tell everyone about your award. I was not only aware of it, I already have my tickets to go, so I will be there. I encourage others to get tickets and join us, and I apologize for not having told everyone about that myself. So
That's all good.
congratulations again.
Good. Yeah, thank you. I call it the Nobel Peace Prize of Delaware. That's my name for it. But it's been a pleasure, you guys. I'm always available, so don't hesitate to reach out.
Thanks, Corie.
Have a good evening, everyone.
You're
Good
welcome.
night.
Good night.